3 spine-chilling true night terrors. Unexplainable secrets revealed that will haunt you forever. Laura's heart raced as she glanced at the clock, its ticking echoing ominously in the silence of her dimly lit living room. Just hours ago, everything had seemed normal in Oak Ridge, but now she felt the frantic pull of dark shadows creeping into her safe haven. She had heard the whispers, the unsettling tales of families torn apart by unseen forces, but she had brushed them off until tonight. Every night felt the same. Long shifts at the diner, laughter with her kids, falling into bed exhausted, only to wake to sounds that didn't belong. And that was the start of her waking nightmare as she peered through her curtains. The evening chill fell against her skin like icy fingers. Flickering street lamps illuminated twisted figures moving uneasily along the edges of her yard. What were they saying? She couldn't make out the words, but the tone felt menacing. Panic strummed through her veins, her breath shallow. The night deepened, and Laura's thoughts spiraled into terror. Only the soft rustle of leaves accompanied her escalating dread. How could she protect Sam and Mia? Days turned into a blur, each feeling tighter, like a noose forming around her throat. Pets had disappeared, leaving frantic owners searching and calling out in despair. Neighbors exchanged alarmed glances, fear creeping into their friendly banter. She felt eyes on her family, always watching, always waiting, and her mind couldn't shake the chilling story that had circulated long ago. The vengeful spirit stalking Oak Ridge. It targeted families hiding burdens, and she found herself wondering, what if the tales held a grain of truth? Every corner she turned, Laura scrutinized the people she thought she knew. There was Mr. Adams, the retired officer next door, too helpful, too quiet. His kind smile felt shadowed by an unseen weight, something heavy, something buried beneath the well-manicured lawn. Restless nights consumed her. Leaving her home felt like stepping into a snare, each moment throbbing with heaviness that tangled her thoughts. And then it hit her, could he be connected to the town's history of tragedies? Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. But moments later, reality shattered like glass. The jarring screams of her empty home leapt forth, plunging her into pure terror. She bolted upright, her breath erratic. Sam and Mia were gone. She stumbled through the door and called their names, her voice echoing down the quiet street. Nothing. No laughter. No familiar sounds. Just lingering silence that stretched like an endless night. Desperation clutched at her heart until, in a daze, she turned toward Mr. Adams' home. He stood there, just out of reach, shadows pooling around him. Doubt gnawed at her insides. Was he their savior or the source of her nightmares? And as the whispers grew louder around her, she felt that ancient presence creeping ever closer, a specter demanding a price she was not willing to pay. Her world tilted on its axis, teetering dangerously, as fear coiled tightly within her. The darkness beckoned, and with it, a haunting question lingered: how far would she go to uncover the truth? And would it save her family or bury them in secrets forever? Laura's pulse pounded in her ears as she approached Mr. Adams's front porch, her breath coming in short gasps. The shadows flickered, stretching unnaturally across the ground like fingers reaching out. She didn't want to step closer. Every instinct screamed at her to run. But what choice did she have? Her children were missing. The thought churned her stomach, twisting it into a tight knot of desperation. Mrs. Bennet. His voice cut through the stillness like a knife, soft yet commanding. You shouldn't be out here so late. She hesitated, instinctively taking a step back, but his gaze locked onto hers, almost probing. Where are Sam and Mia? She demanded, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. Inside, he replied, a hint of menace creeping into his tone. They're safe for now. The word safe knotted her thoughts further, each second stretching painfully. What do you mean by safe? Panic washed over her as she looked toward his door, sensing the void behind it. What dwelled in that dark space? He stepped closer, blocking her view, the smile fading from his face. You need to understand, Laura. There are things at play in Oak Ridge that you don't see. Burdens that must be borne. Burden. The word hung in the air, thick and suffocating. It echoed in her mind, surfacing memories of whispered secrets and hushed conversations. Laura's heart leapt as a realization dawned the town's history. The stories of loss and despair, they weren't mere legends. They were warnings. Let me in, she said, defiance seeping into her voice. I need to know where my kids are. His expression darkened. You have to make a choice, Laura. There are fates worse than losing them. Her heart dropped. The gravity of his words sank in. Every tale of horror she had dismissed came rushing back, weaving its web around her mind. She was unprepared for the truth that might emerge. The fear that clawed at her was paralyzing. Just then, a loud crash shattered the stillness. The sound emanated from inside Mr. Adams's house, pulling her attention. Without thinking, she lunged forward, past him, pushing open the door. It creaked loudly, an unwelcome invitation into the murky unknown. The living room was dim, shadows swirling, and the air felt thick with something ancient and oppressive. Sam. Mia. She cried, voice raw as the echo bounced back at her. There was no answer, only the deep, unsettling silence wrapping around her like a shroud. A chill crept along her spine as she scanned the room. Dark outlines shifted on the walls. The very essence of fear weaved into her heart, pressing down harder with every beat. From the corner of her eye, she caught movement, a figure half hidden in the gloom. Desperation clawed at her as she stepped forward to investigate. Suddenly, a soft whisper brushed against her ear, sending icy shards through her veins. Leave now or lose them forever. Those words twisted inside her mind, colliding with her fading resolve. She turned back toward Mr. Adams, who stood in the doorway, eyes gleaming with a mixture of pity and something darker. And then it hit her, his intentions weren't just sinister. They were part of something much larger, a cycle of pain and sacrifice that gripped the town. The walls began to close in, the atmosphere tightening like a noose. This wasn't merely about her children anymore. It was about survival, a race against time to uncover the sinister truth lurking beneath the town's surface. Get out, she shouted, adrenaline surging as she plunged deeper into the shadows. The room felt alive, breathing, watching. But where were her kids? Plunging into the heart of the darkness felt like a desperate gamble, one she might lose. As she turned a corner, a flicker of hope lit her heart. The faint sound of giggles echoed softly, drawing her in. If only she knew, with every step moving closer to her children, she was also moving deeper into a darkness she might never escape. As the laughter faded, an eerie whisper slipped through the air once more, you shouldn't have come here. And without knowing, Laura faced her greatest fear, questioning if she would ever see her children again. The hunt for truth was only beginning, but at what cost? The darkness enveloped her like a heavy fog. Each breath she took felt weighted, stifling. Sam. Mia. Her voice wavered, swallowed by the blackness. The giggles had led her deeper into the house, the sound echoing off the walls, teasing, taunting, and luring her away from the exit. The air in the living room thickened, and with each step she took, it felt as if the very shadows bent and twisted under her weight, eager to pull her under. Fear crawled along her skin, prickling like static, and her instincts screamed to turn back. But drive and desperation pushed her onward. Suddenly, the giggling stopped. A deathly silence replaced it, leaving only the throbbing pulse in her ears. Laura's heart sank. No, 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 she whispered, feeling something shift in the air like a warning. Ahead, an old door stood slightly ajar, not more than an outline framed by the weak glow of a distant light. Hope surged like a wave. Please, she pleaded, plunging forward. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness so thick it seemed to swallow the light whole. She hesitated, peering into the void. Sam? Mia? Nothing. Just the hollow echo of her voice, deeper and more haunting than before. Taking one careful step, then another, she descended the stairs. The scent of damp earth and decay filled her lungs, almost choking her with each inhale. Voices echoed faintly up the stairs, a murmuring chorus, indistinct yet deeply unsettling, like the sound of a crowd in a distant nightmare. A chill crept down her spine, freezing her in place. What's happening? She thought, stark realization rewriting her memories of the townsfolk who had whispered warnings over the years. Secrets layered beneath layers of untrustworthy smiles. She continued into the bowels of the house, gripping the banister as the cold seeped into her bones. The voices grew louder, edged with anguish, a sound that twisted her gut into knots. They intertwined, forming a crescendo of desperation, and she quickened her pace, longing for her children but knowing that something sinister awaited her below. To the foot of the stairs, the corridor widened into a low-ceilinged chamber. The walls were lined with aged photographs, sepia-toned faces staring down at her, their expressions twisted in a grotesque mix of terror and despair. Each image seemed to tell a story, a warning, a fate that echoed unreleased sorrow, and Laura's heart raced as she caught glimpses of familiar faces among the strangers. And then she saw them, two small figures huddled in the corner, faces turned away from her, hidden under a shroud of shadows. "Sam! Mia!" she cried, moving closer, her voice cracking under the weight of her fear as she approached. The hushed voices intensified, swirling around her like a tempest. The children remained still, their hair ruffling as if caught in a breeze, but there was no wind. "Leave!" The whispers tangled in her thoughts, growing in urgency. "They belong to us. Stay away." She reached for them but froze as the walls began to pulse, the very surface of the room alive with something malevolent. The air grew thick, her lungs struggling against the weight of it all. "Mommy!" Sam's voice broke through the chaos, sweet and clear, yet tinged with an unholy echo that made Laura's skin crawl. "I'm here. I'm here." She surged forward, desperate, reaching out to touch them. But the ground beneath her trembled, and suddenly the children turned, faces pale and sunken. Their eyes wide with fear held a profound depth of sadness she couldn't comprehend. "Don't!" Mia gasped, for the first time, whispering as if from a great distance. "Run, please." The words were a dagger to the heart, plunging her into an abyss of dread she had never known. The chamber began to constrict, the shadows stretching toward her, eager to consume. A scream tore from her throat, raw and primal, as she turned. Her feet flew back up the stairs, the whispers chasing her, clawing at her mind. She stumbled into the living room, heart pounding, trembling fingers fumbled at the door in a panic. But Mr. Adams stood there, blocking her way like an immovable force, eyes dark with knowing. "Did you find them, Mrs. Bennet?" he asked, a twisted smile creeping across his face. "No." She felt the walls closing in again, the weight of lurking horrors crashing down upon her. "Then you're far too late." The words hung heavy in the air. Every ounce of bravado she had vanished. She was trapped in a nightmare woven from her own desperate love. But she couldn't stay. Not now. Not ever. Laura turned to the back door, her last chance to escape. Every shadow behind her felt ready to pounce, ready to drag her into its waiting maw. But just as she reached for the handle, a hand gripped her shoulder from behind, and the darkness whispered again, "You can never leave." The familiar weights of dread settled, and as she turned to face the unknown, she faced the true horror of what she had awakened. Could she defy the fate that bound Oak Ridge together? Or would she too become part of its endless cycle? The grip on her shoulder tightened, fingers like ice with a strength that belied their frail appearance. Laura's heart thundered in her chest as she faced the shadowy figure behind her, the familiar outline of Mr. Adams blurring into something otherworldly. His smile widened, an unsettling curve that was less friendly and more predatory. "You should be listened," he murmured, voice dripping with a sweetness that turned bitter in the air. The room spun around her, walls closing in, every corner darkened, becoming a prison of despair. "Let me go." She twisted, trying to break free from the icy grip, but it held firm, pulling her back as the whispers swelled, an unholy chorus swelling louder around them. "Mommy!" Another voice, strong, desperate, called out from the depths of the shadows. "Not Sam. Not Mia. Something else. Where are they?" Laura yelled, desperation clawing at her throat. The shadows writhed, almost alive, as though each silhouette held a piece of her children's soul, twisted and bound to this forsaken place. "They are safe for now," Mr. Adams replied, his tone almost mocking. "But they cannot stay long. The house has its needs." "What do you mean?" Panic laced her words, each syllable heavy with fear. "To live, the house must feed." He stepped closer, and the shadows danced, forming grotesque shapes. A creature with too many limbs reached for her. "You've awakened it. You've invited it in." She stumbled backward, the air thick around her, and the light from above was swallowed by a wave of dread. "No, I won't let you take them." The whispers escalated to a roar, drowning out her thoughts. Join us," they pulled at her mind, tearing at the fabric of her reality. She squeezed her eyes shut, blocking out the torment, and in that moment, she envisioned her children's faces, their smiles chasing away the darkness. With a fierce push, she broke free from his hold, launching herself toward the door. Her heart raced, pounding in her ears louder than the chaotic whispers. But just as she reached the threshold, the light flickered, dimming, leaving her standing at the brink of an abyss. "Go ahead. Run," Mr. Adams taunted, leaning casually against the framing of the door. "But you'll only run deeper into the house. You're in its grip now." Her mind raced with frantic calculations as the shadows grew more pronounced. She darted left, down a narrow hallway. She didn't even know where it led, but any direction seemed better than facing him or the thing he had become. The air tightened around her, and as she ran, an icy breath cascaded over her neck. She dared not look back. The shadows behind her whispered promises of despair, urging her to surrender. Laura stumbled into a dim room filled with old, creaking furniture that had long since stopped creaking for the living. A single window drew her attention, cracked and surrounded by gnarled vines. If she could just break through, the light would guide her out. But before she could reach it, the door slammed shut behind her. She spun to find Mr. Adams leaning against it, arms crossed, an amused glint in his eyes. "Trust me, Laura. The only escape is through." Understanding his smile made her skin crawl as if anticipating her next move. The room began to pulse, walls vibrating with energy. Memories rushed like shadows, pictures of past families, moments captured in time, all tethered to this very space. Each face mirrored her own confusion, their open mouths soundlessly screaming warnings. "Let me out. Listen closely," he said, stepping closer, his presence suffocating. "What you don't understand could lead you to the truth or to oblivion." A low growl echoed behind him, a lingering vibration in the air. Something far deeper than mere shadows shifted in the darkness, shaping itself into a creature that defied reason. A horror made flesh, and whispers oozed from every corner, binding her feet to the ground. The light dimmed further, leaving only the monstrous silhouette of whatever lay beyond. "Where are Sam and Mia?" she shouted, voice trembling. With a sudden hush, the walls seemed to lean in, breathless, waiting for the answer. "They are not lost, nor are they free." Mr. Adams' voice dripped with dark glee. "They've become part of the cycle now, like you will soon be." The room quaked again. Shadows writhed as if anticipating her surrender, calling for her to join the others trapped in the void. Laura's pulse quickened, awareness crystallizing. There was no choice left but to confront this nightmare if she hoped to save her children. But what lay ahead was a truth darker than she could imagine. She took a deep breath, readying herself for the impossible. Was she strong enough to unearth the horrors they had all faced? Could she defeat the very darkness that threatened to consume them all? As she stood there, heart racing, the shadows charged at her, ready to claim their prize. The shadows seemed to breathe, thickening and swirling around her, an oppressive weight that threatened to crush her spirit. Laura's heart hammered against her ribs as she braced herself, the whispers clawing at the edges of her mind, tempting her to surrender. Fight it, she shouted into the dark, the words tearing from her throat fueled by desperation. She felt a pulse of energy flow through her, igniting a flicker of defiance. The creature lurking just beyond the edges of the dim light stirred, its presence feeling both monstrous and hungry. Mr. Adams's laughter echoed through the room, a harsh, mocking sound. You think your spirit can resist? This house thrives on the weak. Your fear is its feast. The shadows slithered closer, a mass of darkness ready to engulf her. But somewhere deep inside, a flicker of resolve ignited. All she had to do was find Sam and Mia. They were trapped, perhaps somewhere in this nightmare, but they were not gone. Not yet. She thought of their laughter, the warmth of their hugs, and in that memory, a beacon emerged through the darkness. You may think you own this place, but I'll fight you, she yelled defiantly, and the shadows recoiled for just an instant. As if they recognized her fire without thinking, Laura dashed towards the monstrous figure, ignoring the way her feet felt glued to the floor for a moment. Time slowed as she surged forward, the weight of the house shifting, trembling with every step she took. Why fight when you can join? The figure hissed, motioning with elegant, grotesque limbs that twisted unnaturally. You could be united, like them. In the corner of her vision, more silhouettes faced her with wide, terrified eyes, a mass of trapped souls, their faces etched in agony. The creature lunged, and Laura ducked just in time, feeling the rush of cold air as it passed above her. Her heart raced even faster, adrenaline surging through her veins. I just need to find my children, she gasped, charging towards the nearest wall, pressing her hands against it. Wall or escape? Even thinking of breaking through the barrier was terrifying. It could be just another trap. Where are you? She whispered, closing her eyes and listening. The house was alive with noises, creaks, groans, whispers strung together in an unsettling symphony. Then, a soft cry pierced through the chaos. Mommy! Mia's voice, so fragile and distant, broke through the walls of despair. It was enough to fuel her courage. Where? Laura responded, urgency clawing at her throat, each moment stretching into eternity, laden with dread. Mia, where are you? Here in the light. The voice came again, clearer than before but laden with a hollow quality that sent shivers down Laura's spine. Hang on. I'm coming. The room shifted around her, shadows swaying as though the house itself was responding to her resolve. And then, without warning, the walls began to ripple, morphing like liquid, revealing a doorway bathed in an eerie glow. But before she could move, Mr. Adams's voice dripped like venom. You shouldn't have come here. You don't understand what that light is. Behind him, the monstrous creature stirred further, stretching its unnatural limbs, revealing jagged teeth ready to sample the world of the living. I will save them, Laura roared, her voice fueled by the clarity of a bond stronger than any shadow. She thrust forward towards the light, adrenaline compelling her as hope surged in her chest. But the shadows tightened around her limbs, gripping her like a vice. She struggled, fighting against the pull. No, she screamed, her voice fierce against the encroaching dark. And just as her fingers brushed against the glow, the entire room exploded into a cacophony of screams and laughter. The air crackled with unholy energy, and a darkness more profound pressed against her very existence. The shadows surged forward like a tidal wave, drowning her in chilling despair. As every ounce of fear and determination flooded her mind, one final thought tickled her consciousness. What if she wasn't meant to find Sam and Mia at all? What if this house was just using her, playing its games and feasting off her fears? The light beckoned with a promise of clarity, but also of a darker truth. The screams grew louder, echoing in her ears, and all she could do was hope that bravery would outweigh the horror. Would she find her children, or was she marching towards an even greater darkness? The decision wouldn't wait much longer. As the shadows closed in, the darkness pressed in, suffocating. As Laura fought against the grip of the shadows, her mind a raging storm of fear and determination. With every ounce of strength, she tore at the clutches tightening around her, each desperate gasp like a hammer striking against the chains that bound her. The whispers intensified, swirling like a tempest, promising despair and beckoning her to give in. "Find the light," she screamed, urgency propelling her words into the dark void. Each syllable felt like a plea for salvation. But the laughter of Mr. Adams rang through the room, insidious and cold. "The light does not save you, Laura. Consumes." She could almost feel the warmth of it through the layers of cold dread suffocating her. Was it salvation or a snare? There was no time to dwell on doubt. The massive shadows distorted around her, writhing and shifting as they formed grotesque shapes. They pulled at her fears, curling their tendrils around the deepest parts of her psyche, playing like an old record of anguish and regret. Images flashed through her mind of Sam's innocent smile, Mia's tiny hands reaching out to her. The children, they were in danger, and she was their only hope. "Mommy!" Mia's voice echoed again, piercing through the chaos as a jagged shard of clarity. It was close now, much closer than before. "Please hold on," Laura shouted, her voice cracking as she summoned what strength remained. She mustered the last of her resolve, forcing herself towards the shimmering light that grinned from the edges of the doorway. The massive form of the creature loomed ever closer. It was a shadow of nightmares, sharp, terrifying, pulsating with hungry malice. Laura felt its icy breath against her skin, electric terror racing down her spine. "You want to reach it? You'll have to come through me," it snarled, its voice twisted like broken glass. "Not if I can help it," Laura retorted, agitated and frantic. She pushed against the shadows, grasping at her legs, feeling them slip as she lunged forward. The light was mere inches away. With one final desperate push infused with every ounce of maternal love, she thrust herself toward the glimmering doorway, but the house roared back in defiance. The walls trembled violently, as if the very foundation of the nightmare was shaking at the idea of her escape. With an explosive force, shadows burst forth, coiling around Laura and compelling her to halt. She felt her breath catch in her throat, fear clawing at her insides. "What are you?" she gasped, struggling against the dark that threatened to consume her whole. "We are the reflection of your fears, the echoes of your regrets," Mr. Adams hissed, stepping forward through the gloom, his figure outlined by the eerie glow. "The light is a trap, and you will join those inside, like the others who tried to rescue their own." A knowing chill trickled through her. Was this a ploy? Every word clawed at her insides, gnawing at her resolve. "Get away from me," she screamed, heart racing, every beat filled with the memories of her children, her family. But something cracked within her. The shadows shivered, reflecting her own despair back at her. A grotesque mirror. "Join us," the shadows whispered enticingly in 100 voices, forming the faces of those Laura had lost and failed. "No." Her voice sounded small, even to herself, yet she stood defiantly against their onslaught, the warmth of her defiance flickering like a candle in the storm. Just then, another scream rang out, piercing through the dark. "Sam! Mom! Help!" Echoes of her children's cries intertwined, and the power of love surged. The light began to pulse stronger, thrumming in sync with her heartbeat. The shadows trembled, retreating, but only for a moment. With renewed vigor, she reached out for the door, desperation flooding her senses. She could almost touch the light just a step away. "What will you sacrifice to save them?" The house whispered, temptation lacing every word. With that single question, Laura halted, frozen at the threshold. That choice hung heavy in the air, waiting, expectant. The shadows swirled around her, promising comfort in despair. A soft glow beckoned, yet she felt the weight of a truth slowly sinking in. Was she strong enough? Was she willing to pay the ultimate price? The answer would change everything, but the darkness surged and the light flickered as time danced precariously, and the house shuddered as it awaited her decision. Could she truly save her children, or would she lose herself in the process? As that thought hung menacingly in the air, the shadows lunged once more. The shadows lunged, and with a fierce intensity, Their cold fingers wrapped around Laura, clutching her tighter. Panic soared within her chest like wildfire. She had to escape. The voices grew louder, a cacophony filled with despair and sorrow. "Join us! Join us!" They chanted in a rhythmic lullaby that echoed through her mind. Heart pounding, Laura fought against the darkness, her thoughts swirling. The light shimmered, a beacon that promised safety, but doubt crept in. What would she lose? Could she save her children without losing her soul? "Mom! Help!" The cry came again, more desperate. It was a cry she couldn't ignore, a pleading she couldn't afford to dismiss. The thought of her children ignited a spark of defiance. She gathered herself, pushing against the oppressive weight of darkness. "Get away from me!" she screamed, her voice reverberating like thunder through the shadowy expanse. But the shadows only drew nearer, shifting into forms that clawed at her heart. "Your love will be your undoing," Mr. Adams taunted, emerging like a specter from the murk. His eyes shone with malevolence, reflecting the chaos surrounding her. "You have a choice, Laura. Save them or save yourself." Laura's breath hitched, not from fear alone but from the dawning realization. She might not have a choice at all. With a surge of energy she didn't know she possessed, she surged forward. The light pulsed urgently, flickering as if aware of her struggle. The moment felt eternal, the shadows tightening their grip, yet she pushed through the past that haunted her. Images stirred a time when everything felt right, moments with Sam and Mia that now seemed achingly distant. Then the scream pierced through the air again. "Mom!" It was raw, filled with fear, echoing off the walls like an ancestral call. In that instant something inside shifted. With a fierce roar, Laura kicked against the darkness, flinging herself toward the light. She felt the shadows splinter around her, shrieking in fury, 1,000 regrets clawing at her skin. But as she neared the threshold, the light dimmed. "It's not enough," Mr. Adams warned, his voice a chilling whisper. "You can't escape without giving something up." "What?" she cried, tears flooding her eyes. "What do you want from me?" "Everything," he replied, grinning as the shadows twisted and morphed into grotesque faces of those she had lost. "Leave them out of this," she roared, shaking off the imagery of despair that closed around her like ivy. The shadows stilled momentarily, and an eerie silence filled the air. She could feel their hesitation, their uncertainty. "What if I offered you my pain? My regrets?" she blurted out, desperation driving her words. The darkness shivered, curiosity sparking in its depths. "Pain is a heavy burden. Are you sure you want to part with it?" Another scream in the distance drew her back to reality. "I have to save them," she shouted defiantly, her voice breaking as she looked toward the flickering door. The shadows surged back, writhing in hunger, and Laura understood that the darkness sought to anchor her shame and regret. But what if she could cast it away? With all her strength, she took one more step toward the light, her heart beating with a wild rhythm. "I offer my pain," she cried out, her voice ringing like a bell. "Take it and let me save my children." A deep rumble shook the house, anxiety coursing through her veins. But suddenly, the shadows hesitated. "What will you become without it?" She could only hope her answer was enough. As she stepped forward, everything shifted and she felt an invisible chain snap, a desperate hope igniting in her heart. Then the shadows lunged again, faster, angrier. She had given her pain, but at what cost? Would they let her pass? As the first rays of the light touched her skin, a sudden violent pull yanked her from the threshold. Laura screamed, the sound lost in the howling chaos of her surroundings. What would happen next? Would she lose herself in the darkness? Or could she finally save her children? As the light flickered, its pulsing rhythm dimming, she felt the shadows closing in. The shadows receded, twisting as if caught in a struggle far beyond her comprehension. Laura gasped for breath, the cold fingers of the darkness retreating but not relinquishing their grip entirely. Panic surged through her veins as she felt their insidious whispers clawing at her mind, each syllable intent on dragging her back into despair. "You chose wrong. You chose wrong," they chanted, a mocking echo that reverberated through her soul. For a fleeting moment, her heart leapt at the thought of escape, but the realization that her pain had merely shifted rather than vanished infected her hope with dread. What did Mr. Adams mean? What would she become? She felt unmoored, as if shedding layers of herself meant losing the very essence of who she was. Everything began to blur: the edges of the light, the outline of Mr. Adams, the anguished screams of her children fading in and out like static interference on a broken radio. Laura! The cry was near. Too near. It was Mia's voice, threading through the chaos with a clarity that sent chills racing down her spine. "Mom! Help us! I'm coming!" she screamed, pushing every ounce of strength still left within her towards that voice. The shadows writhed violently, anger surging as they twisted around her, weaving a web of despair as they whispered of eternal torment. She could feel their coldness against her skin, tightening as if to crush the hope she clung to. "Leave them alone," Laura shouted. "They have nothing to do with this." But who could she convince? The shadows? The sounds of laughter rang out now, cruel and haunting. Memories flooded her mind: Sam's first steps, the warmth of Mia's embrace, laughter shared on sunny afternoons. The sweetness turned bitter as every warm memory twisted, tainted by the shadow's insidious corruption. "Join us, Laura." Mr. Adams appeared before her, a twisted grin stretched across his face, his eyes flickering with dark fire. "This is your choice. Be free of the burdens or join your children in despair. They cry for you, but who will hear them if you falter?" "No," she shouted defiantly, the shadow of doubt roiling within her chest. "I choose to fight. I won't let you take them." The ground shook violently beneath her feet, the very fabric of the space around her distorting. Dark tendrils snaked towards her like serpents, grasping and pulling, and she could feel the bite of the cold as it sought her heart. Just beyond the shadows, she glimpsed the flickering light dimming further, an all too familiar loss creeping over her. "Pain and regret are what give you strength," the shadows shrieked, their cacophony rising almost to a fever pitch, drowning out the cries of her children. "Erase them, and you become weak and lost to us." The sound of her children screaming for help forged a blazing resolve within Laura's core. "I'd rather be weak and fight for their lives," she replied, refusing to succumb to their despair. "I won't let you take them." The shadows recoiled for just an instant, stunned by her defiance, then surged with renewed fury. Gripping her shoulders, they thrust her back against the darkened wall, her breath coming in heaving gasps. She could feel the overwhelming force of their hunger bearing down on her, threatening to smother the tiny spark of hope she still wielded. With a sudden burst of insight, Laura reached into herself, memories flooding in, weaving a tapestry of love and strength. "You may take my pain," she whispered, almost a prayer, "but my love will never be yours." Then, with a piercing conviction, she released that love into the nearest shadows. It poured from her, spilling forth like a river surging to break through the dam. Influenced by their hunger, the shadows writhed but began to fragment under the weight of her emotion. The fury of the darkness roared, and then with the intensity of a storm, Laura felt the pull of the light grow stronger. It flickered as if awakening to her call, and just as she thought she might lose her footing, she stepped forward, letting the power of her love obliterate the darkness that sought to drown her. But before she could fully cross the threshold, the shadows morphed into a figure, a faceless entity looming over her. "You think you're free?" it hissed. "You have only awakened the worst of what lies beneath." The moment hung heavy, the air thick with uncertainty. Beneath the shadows, the echoes of Mia and Sam continued to fight for attention. Could she emerge victorious? Or would her sacrifice only open the door to something worse? The shadows shifted, their whispering promises of despair ringing louder than the flickering light. The entity loomed even closer, its faceless void pressing into her thoughts. Laura's heart raced, each pulse reverberating in the hollow silence that enveloped her. "What have you done?" it whispered, the sound like nails scraping against a chalkboard, grating and insistent. "You believe your love can protect you? You will discover how wrong you truly are." A wave of cold washed over her as shadows unraveled around the figure, twisting into grotesque forms, each one more terrifying than the last. They reached out, fingers elongated and claw-like, brushing against her skin with a chill that clawed at her soul. No! Laura screamed again, fighting against the tide of despair. I won't let you take me. She felt herself tethered to her memories, a fragile rope in a storm. Mia! Sam! She called into the void, desperation spiraling her voice. The silence muttered back, echoing her fears. Would their cries drown in the shadows? Suddenly, there was a flicker of warmth, like sunlight breaking through the darkest clouds. She seized upon it, allowing it to flow through her. With every breath, she gathered her resolve, the memories of her children burning bright against the consuming dark. The shadows recoiled, whispering in panic. No, you cannot resist. Your love makes you vulnerable. So what? She gritted her teeth, summoning the essence of every shared moment, every tear and laugh. It makes me strong. With that, Laura erupted into the light, her love exploding into a radiant pulse that surged through her. It pushed back against the encroaching shadows, thinning their ranks. The darkness let out a furious howl, twisting in agony as it lost ground. But from within the chaos, she felt tendrils seeking her again, snaking around her ankles, dragging her down. Fear gripped her heart. She stumbled, guilt clawing at her, threatening to overwhelm her. You cannot be free, the faceless entity hissed again. You will drag them into despair with you. That thought echoed like a bullet through her mind. No, she couldn't let that happen. They would suffer if she failed. Suddenly, she saw her children's faces emerging from the shadows, flickering like flames in a storm. They watched her with wide, frightened eyes, their cries muted but their pain palpable. Each shimmer ignited an instinct, urging her to fight harder. I'll save you, she shouted, channeling every fragment of love she had ever felt. I won't give up. She poured her heart out, envisioning Mia and Sam, their laughter lighting up her darkest days. The shadows shrieked, struggling against the barrage of warmth. Yet the entity loomed closer, a wall of darkness brute and unyielding. Be careful what you wish for, Laura, it growled, weaving its shadows tightly around her. A new wave of dread washed over her. What if this battle only summoned a greater evil? Her strength was waning, the light flickering perilously. She could feel her energy draining, her very soul teetering precariously on the edge of oblivion. Then a whisper lingered over the dark, faint yet familiar. Mom, Sam? Laura focused as the darkness called out to her children, manipulating their voices, breaking her confidence into fragments. Help us stop, Laura bellowed, battling the re-emerging shadows. She needed clarity. She needed everything became a frantic blur. Her children's cries melted into the cacophony of whispers, each one laced with dark temptation. The struggle tightened as she felt herself slipping backward. Please, she gasped. Come back to me. But as she braced herself against the wave of despair, a sinister laughter echoed loudly, drowning her out. It cut deep, curling inside her like an anchor dragging her down. Then she heard Mr. Adams' voice, slippery and sly. Are you sure about your choice, Laura? You have opened a door that cannot be closed. The truth will always find you. The shadows suddenly solidified, a murky wall pressing against her, and she realized, for all her defiance, the truth might be more horrifying than she could ever face. In that moment of paralyzing doubt, she felt the weight of something lurking in the dark, a presence far greater than she had imagined. What terrible truth awaited her? What had her fight awakened? The shadows encroached, eager to reclaim her, their tide swelling, and a new dread took form, merging with her desperation. Would she stand alone, or would she unravel completely? Mom! The cry rang out again, now sharp as glass, echoing hauntingly through her mind. Was it too late to fight? Or worse, too late to save her children? The shadows surged, swallowing her cry, leaving her trapped in their endless void. The shadows surged, eager to claim Laura, swirling around her like a tempest of despair. But in that moment, as she trembled on the precipice of oblivion, Something deep and fierce ignited within her. The warmth of motherhood surged in her veins, awakening instincts she thought had been buried beneath the weight of fear. "No!" she shouted, her voice echoing like thunder, shaking the oppressive darkness. "I will not let you take my children." Summoning all her love, she reached deep within, past the terror, past the memories of pain, and found the strength woven into her very being. The light pulsed in response, its radiance igniting like a beacon of hope swirling around her. "Together," she called aloud, desperate to reach Sam and Mia. "We are stronger together." From the darkness, familiar voices trembled. "Mom, help us!" Their cries were laced with fear, but also a thread of hope, a reminder of the love that had kept her going through the endless cycle of dread. In a burst of pure emotion, Laura lunged toward the flickering light, surging through the cacophony of shadows like a warrior fueled by purpose. The darkness writhed and churned, clawing at her as it tried to pull her back, but with every step, the shadows recoiled. "You have no power here," she screamed, reclaiming her voice from the grasp of despair. The light glimmered brighter, a cocoon surrounding her, dissipating the haunting whispers that promised her demise. "Mommy, we're scared." Mia's voice shattered through the darkness, both a plea and a spark igniting Laura's resolve. She could feel them. They were close, trapped, but they're just beyond the veil of shadows. "Hold on," she urged as she pushed deeper into the heart of the blinding light, feeling its warmth envelop her, protecting against the chill that sought to gnaw at her soul. "I'm coming. We'll be together." In the flickering light, she saw their faces emerge, silhouettes of her children, filled with fear yet laced with hope. "Laura." Mr. Adams's voice cracked through the darkness, a warning laced with malice. "You cannot save them. They are part of the cycle." Laura shook her head, memories swirling around her. Laughter on sunny days, bedtime stories, and warm hugs that spoke of nothing but unconditional love. "No," she shouted, forcing her way through the shadows, determination stirring in her heart. "My love can't be unmade. It's stronger than your darkness." The shadows hissed, recoiling from her fierce spirit, struggling against the tide of light cascading from her heart. With each step she took, she felt the shadows dissipating, losing their grip and control. "Mom!" The voices rose again, clearer now. The cries orchestrated a song of rescue that pierced through the layers of despair. Just as she reached out for their tiny hands, the figure of Mr. Adams lurched forward, desperate to claw them back, shadows swirling around him like a storm. "Stop!" he growled, an echo of rage in his voice. "You can't save them, Laura. You have to make a choice." With fierce clarity, she turned to him, grounding herself in the certainty of her love. "You're wrong. I want to choose between myself and my children. We are bound together by love, and there's nothing you can do to break that." The shadows surged, an infernal roar urging her to yield. Yet, she felt the pull of her children's hands, their warmth igniting every bit of hope within her. "1, 2, 3, she shouted, pulling them closer, determination surging as they grasped onto her. In that instant, the house shook violently, the light erupting forth as a shield against the encroaching darkness. It pushed back violently, banishing the shadows that had haunted and tormented them. For a split second, time seemed to freeze, a moment suspended between the realms of despair and hope. Holding onto each other tightly, they surged toward the shimmering light that had come to their aid, and together, they broke free from the darkness. A blinding flash of light engulfed them, illuminating the terrifying figures of shadows and the twisted face of Mr. Adams as they dissolved into wisps of smoke, leaving behind nothing but echoes of their haunting presence. "No, you cannot escape," he roared, but the brightness enveloped them like a soothing balm. With a final thrust, Laura felt the chill of night slip away, replaced with warmth, the overwhelming scent of freedom and love cascading around them. As their feet touched solid ground, she looked around, reeling from the whirlwind of events. They stood back in their yard, the house behind them now silent, its darkness finally drawn back into the void. And at that moment, Laura clutched Sam and Mia even tighter, tears of relief spilling down her cheeks. "Are you all right?" she whispered, brushing her hands over their faces, searching for any sign of their pain. Both children nodded, their wide eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "We're okay, Mommy," Sam murmured, leaning against her. "I knew you'd come for us," Mia added, her small hand clasped in Laura's. And in that moment, surrounded by the fading echoes of terror, they found their strength anew. The shadows of Oak Ridge had tried to tear them apart, but love had triumphed over the darkness. "Let us go home," Laura whispered, heart heavy yet buoyed by hope. Together, they walked toward the warm embrace of their home, the night air sweet and light around them. And as they stepped inside, leaving the shades of fear behind, Laura realized that true strength comes from the bonds we nurture, from the love we keep close. And no darkness could ever dim their light again. This is where their story ends, but remember, if you've enjoyed this journey, you need to subscribe now. Hit that bell icon to never miss an exclusive story again. Smash that like button to support the channel. Leave your reactions and theories down in the comments. And don't wait even one more second to share this with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. We're all in this together. Make sure their hearts feel the warmth of our community too.